So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to the 8th Clash of the Titans Invitational Debate. Can we start again with a round? Mr. Ravi Burman, who is the president of the OSA Hindu College, to come and give us a welcome address. Mr. Ravi Burman, please.
Dr. Vijay Lakshmi from Miranda House and others, and we hope the others will join in. Our panel of judges is very distinguished. Mr. Rakesh Kakkar, ex-IAS, and also earlier director of the Habitat Center. Mr. Sanjeev Sai, also ex-IAS, and now director of the prestigious Nehru Memorial Library and the PM's Museums. And Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam is senior advocate in the Supreme Court. So without much ado, I hand over to Kajori to explain the rules.
Thank you so much. I'm at City Colleges joining us. Hindu, of course. I might have a slight bias. Miranda, Lady Shri Ram College, SRCC, Indraprastha College, and Kirodimal College. Welcome to all of you, as well as to all of our guests, our honored judges, our chief guest, who is also my principal, and it's so delightful to see her again. And to all of you, I hope you have an incredible evening. So I'm very briefly going to explain what the rules are going to look like. We've got speakers who are for the motion. The motion today is this House believes that facts are not facts. And as far as the rules go, there will be one speaking for the motion, one against. Each speaker will get 4 plus 1 minute. So at the 4-minute mark, that's going to go off. 1 minute more, the 5-minute mark, I am going to keep pressing this bell until you stop talking. The panelists, at the end of the debate, we will open the House up for questions from the audience. We will have 10 minutes for that, but the interjections will happen from the debaters themselves. So 2 minutes, no cross-questioning allowed. All right, so that one speaker to come up from each team and draw the lots. We're starting with, at number 1, SRCC. Speaking first. Speaking third, Hindu. Speaking fourth, Indraprastha College. So let me take the opportunity to introduce the speakers for and against the motion. From Hindu College for the motion, we have Dr. Aruna. For the motion, Mr. Ram Jori to speak for SRCC. Please go to the closest podium to you.
Public service at the moment are my personal views and should not be taken as the views of the government or any official capacity. Well, the topic is very relevant. Facts are not facts. Perhaps the time is that we define what facts are. Well, every person has its own meaning depending upon the understanding and experience they are in the situation they are in. But law takes its own course. The fact means and includes anything, a state of things or a relation of things capable of being perceived by the senses. It's a very, very broad definition. And in fact, I'm going to speak for that, in favor of that it is not, facts are not facts. Well, I would like to take a few examples which perhaps would explain that what I'm trying to say. The experience of working with government gives you certain information. So if facts are something which have been collected from the base documents, they are comprehensive, they are reliable, and that allow you to see it from a distance, then perhaps you have a broad understanding. But if the facts you come to know only something which you have seen or perceived, then it is only a very limited interpretation. Let me take you an example. Like I'll try to take my examples from the government point of view, from the general, like the events which we see in Delhi course and others also. which would explain that what I mean to say. Well, the types of information can be many. Something can be purely factual. When the sun rises in the east, everyone knows, no one can dispute it. That's a fact. But facts can be analytical also, facts can be subjective also, facts can be objective also. Now let us deal with the topic, say, food subsidy. My experience with dealing with it is like we see something, there's one big corporation which is responsible for supplying food through the public distribution system to the public at large. And last 2-3 years we see that the food subsidy is to the tune of say 2,50,000 crores for the government of India. But is it a fact? When we go deep into it, the person who is working with it, being auditors or being working in the organization, they know more things about it. What happens is that for all flagship schemes for Government of India, the food is supplied by FCI, but only a portion of that comes into the books of the Government of Accounts. In the sense that through administrative instructions, the grains are distributed, and when you have to finance that, it is borrowed from the market, and all the borrowings appears in the books of the Food Corporation of India. In fact, we had made a rough estimate at some point of time in say 2011-12, when we were saying that the fiscal deficit is to the tune of 3.5%. But when we calculated these things which are not in the books of Government of India and appearing in the books of say the food companies or fertilizer companies or for that matter oil companies, the real fiscal deficit was 7.5 to 8%. So a person who goes through what has been stated by the government or looking only into the government books of accounts only gets a partial knowledge about it. They come to know only what has been stated or said. But when you see in the overall perspective, because you can analyze something which is within your purview only when you've seen it in all its aspects, you have seen it that what matters and how the economy as a whole is affected by it, then you get a more broader view and your definition of the facts changes itself. So what is a fact is something which is perceived by your senses with your knowledge which you have at that point of time. But if you broaden your horizon, you come in contact with the people at large and you want to see that what exactly it is, then you come to know what it is. Similarly, in another example, I would like to say that we all notice this farmers' agitation as such. And in fact, government with all its good intention has gone that we want to benefit the farmers. But the persons who are going to be benefited took it in a different sense altogether. What was the reason for it? The reason is that they thought that probably what are the minimum support price which they want to get is going to be disturbed. But the fact of the matter is different. Like we produce food grains and we have got the stock for about 3 years, and half of it gets spoiled because of the storing mechanism and has to be given as animal feed. And when we see that this also contributes to the bigger bill of the food subsidy. But the way things are, when we see it, that how it is to be managed, why it has not to be, and when you see the associated thing, and the farmers are such, like what technology is going into the production of the agriculture, what is our per capita yield, what is our groundwater situation, what would be the situation 10 years from now. So I would like to, these two things say, facts are not facts, it is how we perceive them, what is our source of information, and how thorough we are, and so that we can form an opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jury. I would now like to open the floor up for interjection.
Do you think is the difference between fact and information? I mean, you've given a very generic fact, so what is information and what is fact and how are the two related?
Pieces of facts which are, and then you analyze it so that you form an opinion about something. That's what information is all about. So it is far more comprehensive than the facts, because facts may have only one source, whereas information will have many sources, and you collate them and corroborate what is the finding one, and then reach at an information level.
Right. Any other questions from interjectors? Yes, please go ahead.
I think in your definition of facts, you've mostly argued anything that can be sensorily perceived. But there is a lot of facts based on experiences over time and continuous experience and perceived over generation and history. So how do we account for that, and how does that account for common knowledge and facts?
Well, I'll only say that with more knowledge and experience, perhaps you get a deeper insight into the facts and you come more near to the reality.
Any further questions from interjectors? Yes, please go ahead.
That can't be impeached, which essentially proves that facts are facts and everything else is opinion.
Well, then you correlate and corroborate the things which are there to form an overall opinion. Then your definition of the fact, which was limited to a singular event at earlier point of time, changes. So what you considered fact at the earlier point of time does not remain a fact in the ultimate analysis.
Thank you so much. That was Ram Johri speaking for SRCC for the motion.
Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very grateful to be here at this August gathering. I think when I look at myself and I see this panel and I look at myself as one of the younger speakers here, what I realize is the importance of the future, right? And in that context, the question that I ask myself in this debate is, which is the kind of future that I would like to have, right? A future or a universe where facts are facts, or a universe where they aren't, right? So in that context, maybe defining facts as any claims which are verifiable or reportable, right? Based on experiences as well as observations. In that setting, I'd like to talk about three things. Number one is essentially why facts have so much criticality in terms of how we exist, right? Number two, why there exists an importance of the pace at which you're gauging something to be a fact or not. And three, to counter some of the common claims that the opposition has laid so far and I presume will lay going forward. Starting with the first in terms of why facts are so critical, right? I think before that, just to take a step back, right? Why is debate and discussion so critical? I think, of course, in a democracy, it makes sense, right? You need to discuss so that you can have a societal opinion. But not just democracy, right? Even in interpersonal relationships, right? If you're in a relationship with someone, maybe discussions and debate is how you arrive at a place where you understand each other, right? Even if it's a group of college friends deciding how what they want to do for dinner, right? That's a debate and a discussion. But facts really lie at the bedrock of anything that you're doing, because until and unless you have common ground to debate, right, which is provided to you by these facts, there's no debate which can take place. I think even in the context of the debate that we're having here, until and unless we have some semblance of understanding or commonality of what we define facts are, then we are all debating in different spheres, right? And I think that's a societal problem that we risk if we believe that facts are not facts. And across all of the three examples that I gave, I think what we understand is that this bedrock is something that has to be made solid. Right? Let's look at some other context, like maybe mathematics. There's a concept of axioms, right, which are essentially statements which are regarded as being established. Now, if you eliminate axioms, maybe every mathematical proof would have to start from 1 plus 1 equals 2, and that, believe it or not, is a 360-page proof, and that's something that you can't afford doing. And that's why I think facts really enable us to do the discussions that actually matter, right? The other thing that I want to talk about is the importance of having a fair base of comparison, right? So I think what we often do is that we equate facts with opinions or science, right? Where even science is not necessarily 100% accurate. Now let's just imagine that an alien race comes to Earth and they ask, what's the average height of humans, right? If they want an 80% correct answer, maybe you will say 5 to 6 feet. But if they ask you for a specific 100% necessarily accurate answer, the only answer you can give them is 0 to infinity, right? Because everything except that will risk missing even one individual and will not be 100% accurate. So I think that really goes to show how the base of accuracy that we're looking at is very crucial. And when you have a necessarily 100% correct answer, right, that often becomes meaningless because you're really removing the value that that information would have otherwise provided you. And I think what we often do in this context is also the opposite error, right? Wherein we accept too low a verification as a fact, right? So even if, as the previous speaker mentioned, if there are debates in terms of what the right metric or formula is for, say, the fiscal deficit, right? So that's a debate that happens within the sphere of defining what the correct fact is. And I think that in and of itself does not necessarily imply that the facts are incorrect or that the facts are not facts. Another thing I wanted to talk about is essentially how we feel that today we are in a post-truth world, right? Where opinions and beliefs and faith has sort of overpowered scientific rigor and has overpowered what we think to be information. Now, in that context, let's maybe go back to World War II, right? Of course, it's debatable who necessarily caused the World War, but the fact that thousands and millions of people went into gas chambers and were killed is something which you cannot ever debate against, and that is the fact that you need to ultimately go and have the formal debate. So I think all in all, right, when I look at this motion, what I see is that we need to choose what is the kind of universe that we want to be existing in, right? So in conclusion, when we say that facts are not facts, what we're really doing is we're stepping back from the burden of actually verifying information, from the burden of actually giving a lot of emphasis to deeper analysis that is actually acceptable across the spectrum, right? Because that really is the true mark of something that makes sense. And that's why I think at the end, even in this August forum, right, even in this debate, until and unless we agree on what facts are, the debate cannot happen, and hence facts need to exist. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Parth Chaudhary speaking again.
A certain subset of facts that everyone can then take as the bedrock and then debate from them. Who decides what this common fact would be?
I think the question answers in a narrative which is so strong that what they say is ultimately accepted as fact without debate, right? And I think that's where facts have to reach a level of certainty, have to reach a level of acceptance where at least a large majority, a substantially large majority agrees on.
Hi. So thank you so much for the entire debate. But the problem that you begin with is that facts are important. Instead of establishing whether facts are indeed facts, you have told us throughout your debate that facts are important so that we can debate. So this, I think, was not a debate about, the debate was about whether facts are facts.
No, I think I would have to politely disagree with that, right? So, for example, when I talk about the World War, the idea is that there can be individuals who concede or who believe that the World War never happened, or who believe that it was maybe the fault of the Allied forces, right? But in doing so, in that debate, you can never go ahead and nullify the loss that was suffered, right? Because that loss is a fact. And for you to actually then maybe take lessons from history and for that debate to happen, there needs to be a certain bedrock of what you actually agree upon. And that's where I think the entire notion of why facts are important necessarily leads to our belief and our support for facts as facts.
Yes.
In your previous response, I heard you said for a fact to be a fact, it has to be believed by a big majority. Are you saying anything that is believed by a big majority automatically becomes a fact?
Absolutely not. I think that relation doesn't flow in both directions, right? Also because it really matters in terms of what you are asking, right? So, for example, if your question, if the fact that we are debating is X ideology good, right? That by its very nature is not something which can ever become a fact, even if 100% of people believe in it. And that has to do with the nature of the content as opposed to the simple idea that a majority believes in it. It's a necessary condition but not a sufficient.
Right. Thank you so much. Parth Chaudhary speaking against the motion for SRCC.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and the esteemed panel. I'm going to be speaking for the motion. This House believes that facts are not facts. Before I begin with the meat of the debate and where it in fact should lie, I think there's been a bit of a confusion in the interjections and the previous speeches about whether or not this debate is purely an academic exercise about whether some facts are entirely accurate or whether it's about what is a good belief system to have as a populace of whether facts are facts and whether they should be believed to be accurate. I think both are related, right? I don't think that you can say that facts in and of themselves can be believed to be fact, but I also don't think that it's a good precedent to set that people should believe things to be fact because they are portrayed as something that a majority of people believe. What do I mean by this, right? Let's talk about what are facts. Facts are information that is collected based on observable and reliable sources of knowledge, right? That means that only things that you have been able to prove or substantiate with evidence become fact. So the fact that the earth was round was not a fact before the 16th century because Magellan hadn't circumnavigated the globe for you to be able to prove that that was in fact a fact at the time. It becomes a fact today in our understanding of science and the universe because we can point to information and we can point to knowledge to show that the earth is in fact round and the earth is in fact spherical. That might not be a fact 2000 years from now because somebody might go ahead and disprove that fact itself. What does that tell us? It tells us that facts are only as relevant as they are to where we are in scientific progress today, to where we are in sensitively like perceiving information today, and to where the majority is able to believe and perceive certain information that is available to them today. Why is that dangerous, and why is basing opinion, policy, and worldviews on that particularly dangerous? It's dangerous because once something becomes unfalsifiable, once you attach a sanctity to it that can't in fact be impeached by things like by by emotion, by sensitivity, by sensibility, it gets taken to an elevated podium where nobody can impeach it, right? Because if I back my opinion up with fact and say that there is statistic to say that what I'm saying is correct, nobody can really tell me that I'm wrong. Nobody can really tell me that the decisions on which the decisions that I'm making are based on things that might not be fit for society today. So then what is the solution, right? Why do I think that it doesn't make sense for facts to be so unfalsifiable? I think what becomes a problem is two things, right? One, that there is bias, and two, that there are limited or skewed data sets, right? What is bias? Bias means that people who collate and collect information that then go on to become fact are necessarily plagued by implicit biases that cannot be shed away when they are performing their roles of being scientists or researchers, archaeologists, etc. Right? That means that when you say find a Viking skeleton among many weapons, and for centuries you believe that this Viking skeleton is male, you do that because your historical context and your belief system tells you that anything that is found, any person that is found with weapons must necessarily be a warrior and must necessarily be then a man. Then in 2017, when DNA evidence conclusively proves that the pelvic system of this skeleton was in fact that of a female, you then go ahead and change your belief and say, okay, it may be female, but even then your route of inquiry switches to how did the skeleton make its way to a place where it's around weapons and not, oh, maybe there is a female warrior. Because your understanding and your biases are always going to shape the paths that your route of inquiry is going to take. Secondly, limited data sets. What does that mean? It means that the amount of things that I will look at to be able to form a conclusion will be limited to the extent that I think is relevant for my eventual conclusion that I already want to make. It's called confirmation bias. It means that people who go into modes of inquiry always do it with the purpose of already confirming biases and beliefs that exist as a virtue of their existence in this world, as a virtue of their existence in a political economy and a society where they are plagued with biases that will always exist. So in a world where this is not an academic exercise just to debate whether or not facts can in fact be fact or not, but one where you see whether or not the news that you consume, the views that you hear, the debates that you participate in, whether or not you should see what people are saying as fact and that sanctity of fact is unimpeachable or not, I think you need to say that fact cannot be fact, because if fact is fact, then there is absolutely no debate that's up to happen. We might as well not be standing here and debating the motion to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Gorga Sood speaking for the motion for very generative. I'm curious, when you speak about facts are what they are based on where we are at a particular stage of scientific inquiry, and that allows us to believe in certain facts versus deny certain facts. I'm curious as to how do you understand then the relationship between fact and belief, and what does that do? How do you constitute that relationship? How do you understand fact and belief and their interrelationship? What allows people to believe certain facts versus not? And then what does that do for the production of discourse?
Thank you for your question. I don't think that there is any proportional or linear relation between fact and belief, because I think belief is entirely superior and not at all subservient to fact, which means that there can be n number of things to prove or at least point to the likelihood of proof that God doesn't exist, but my belief in it might prevail regardless. It might not make any scientific or rational sense why I believe in a higher being that doesn't look out for me, that doesn't seem to make things go my way, but I believe nonetheless. So I think that the belief in something is actually something that you'll only do if facts serve your purpose, which is what I was saying about confirmation bias. If I want to believe a fact, then I will consume a fact that is congruent to my belief structure and use it to elevate my position and further enhance my position. But if I hear a fact that is, say, contrary to my belief structure, I'll reject it as being something that probably does not have enough statistical backing or isn't supported by as much evidentiary value. So I think facts don't really play much of a role in determining belief. At best, maybe they will serve as a tool to bolster my ability to explain my belief to you.
Any further questions? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you started by talking about how facts are not facts because you don't want them to be unfalsifiable, right? And on the other hand, when you're giving the example of how maybe earlier people didn't believe the earth was round and then Magellan came and falsified that and established a new fact, right? So then how do you corroborate both of these, right? Are facts supposed to be falsifiable or unfalsifiable?
So I think that the natural defense that you would have to the fact that scientific progress and rationality can make you change your mind is that you can keep coming up with new proof and people will eventually believe that fact as well, and facts are then ever changing and ever evolving. But it's clear that we are coming closer to a society that is fairly proud and almost egotistical of how far we've reached in the scientific ladder, which means that our ability to change and mold to opinions and new beliefs and new facts is constantly diminishing because we think we've reached the pinnacle of where human scientific rationality can really go. So after a certain point, for you to say that 100 years from now I will be as receptive to a new fact as I would have been, say, 10 centuries ago when there was no technology, when there was no ChatGPT, where there was no Google, I'm not entirely sure I agree with that as being something that will always be true.
Right, thank you so much. Gaurika Sood speaking for Lady Shri Ram College for the
so
motion.
much.
I would like to invite
Hi, let me begin with the disclaimer as well. The views expressed are of my own. My organization has nothing to do with this. Okay, having said that, let me also start with a quote from a man. Quoting whom is not fashionable these days. The first Prime Minister of the country said, "Facts are facts and will not disappear on account of your lights." Why did he say that? And that's why I'm here standing before you to argue that facts in fact are facts. Everything else, as you see facts, are your belief. To the younger generation which believes in quick Google search, how is fact defined by Google? Google search tells you that something that you know or happened is true. That's how fact is defined. Alternatively, it says true things or reality. And this is where I think the crux of the question that we're debating tonight is something that you know. You know, the fact that I have been brought into the definition of facts is what is leading to this question, whether facts are facts or not. Because you're now bringing in subjectivity. For me, when I went to journalism school, I am a journalist. When I went to journalism school, the first thing that I was taught were 5 W's and 1 H. And that is, I think, my test of what a fact is. Why, what, when, where, and how. If I can get these 5 things correct in a situation, in mathematical terms, a theorem is considered fact. In scientific terms, experiments which 10 people, 100 people do and all 10 or 100 of them come up with the same result. So in terms of maths and science, what is true may not be true in terms of history writing or looking at a social event. So there, these 5 W's and 1 H help me decide what really is the fact. Yes, you will point out that history is always written by winners, and therefore what is their fact may not be the fact of the loser. But for me, the fact remains the same. The interpretation, the objectivity, the subjectivity that you bring to it changes. Tipu Sultan, a very controversial figure again these days, always labeled either a tyrant or somebody who was a hero, a great patriot, depending on which side of the debate you are. What is the fact? The fact is that he did defeat the Britishers. The fact also is that as per his own accounts of what is it that Tipu Sultan did, he in a way misplaced the trust of people of Coorg. And therefore people in Coorg have their own fact of what Tipu Sultan was. Doesn't mean they are wrong. Doesn't mean that Tipu defeated the British. Two facts can coexist. This is the era of deep fakes. Artificial intelligence had made it very difficult to figure out. Social media is really bombarding you with information, and that's why we are debating whether facts are facts or not. You know, that this terminology became fashionable because filmmaker recently said in an interview that facts are not facts. But if you ask him also to point out the color of the shirt that the gentleman there is wearing, it's white. For all of us, it is white. So it is white. Empirically, it will be proven. And that is the test that, empirically, if you can prove. Today, you may not have the full information. The Nord Stream, what is happening there? It started off by saying that Russia was behind it. Then they said, no, US is behind it. Now they're saying some group from Ukraine could have been behind it. Does not mean that the fact is changing. It just means that at this stage, we don't know enough. Fact remains fact. It's just that at the stage that we are judging whether that fact is fact or not, at that stage, we don't know enough. We need to know enough. From my experience, let me bring to you the Arushi Talwar case. One of the journalists who, by the stroke of luck, landed at that Noida flat first, when the body was still lying there. I have my own facts. But 2 CBI teams landed up there. Each came up with their own set of facts. Today also the jury is open. Who killed Arushi Talwar? Whether it was the servant Krishna or whether parents involved. Does not mean that the fact has changed. Just means that Arun Kumar's team, the CBI officer who blamed Krishna, and AP Singh's team who blamed the parents, they did not do their job properly. The fact will come out one day. I want to just close by telling you that, theoretically, if you want to really take a test of what really fact is, for me, facts are independent of beliefs, knowledge, and opinion. They can be checked by reason, experiment. Facts can be information. So if you look at an onion and if you take out layer by layer, what remains at the core is fact for me, and that's infallible. That does not change, and that's why I believe facts are facts.
Thank you so much. Arunima speaking for Lady Shri Ram College against the motion. I open the floor up for questions. Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks for your speech. I'm wondering if you could shed more light on your statement of 2 facts coexisting. Like, how do you see that happening? And then how do they remain facts? Because in effect, they become contestations.
I just gave you the example of Tipu Sultan. Tipu Sultan won the war at Srirangapatnam against the British. That's a fact. The fact also is that he asked the people of Coorg to come to them for signing of a pact. They believed him, they came without arms, and he completely betrayed their trust. Does not mean that Tipu for people of Coorg is not a tyrant, does not mean that Tipu did not defeat British in that sense. He's not a patriot or a national. For me, 2 facts can coexist. There is no discrepancy between the 2.
Yes, please go ahead.
Well, you mean to say that fact remains a fact till a counter agreement which comes, which proves that it is not a fact?
No. For me, fact remains a fact when you have all the empirical evidence to label it as such. I gave you the example of Nord Stream. It started off by making it, those who were arguing that this is done by Russia thought that that was a fact. But for me, definition of fact is infallible. I gave you the example of the theorem of maths and the scientific experiments. That is the test that we have to give to fact in social context as well. When you meet that test, that's when you can call it fact. Before that, you can call it anything. You can call it your truth, you can call it knowledge, you can call it subjective, but not fact.
You mean to say...
I'm sorry, no cross-questioning. Any further questions? Go ahead.
First of all, really well spoken. I do have a question. Your argument depends heavily on objective data. And as we know, particularly in the world that we're living in now, there is really no such thing as objective data. Data in itself comes with inherent biases. So in that sense, if your facts are based on data which in itself is impeachable and biased, then by your argument, it is no longer a fact, and therefore there is no such thing as a fact.
I disagree. Data is not biased. What data you pick up to prove your point, that might creep in your bias. Data is binary. It's like the computer language, 0 and 1. It is as basic as that. There is a lot of data lying there for you. You choose to pick up data A because you want to argue a particular point. Fact is that basic data, that mere fact, 5 Ws and 1 H, like I said.
All right, thank you so much. Arunima speaking for Lady Shri Ram College against the motion.
It was thick, it had a lot of information, and the school library kept it really safe. I would go to that room to look at that book when I was looking for my facts. It was Britannica Encyclopedia. I hear they don't print it anymore, and students since have been going to Wikipedia to look for the facts that they aspire to know. I stand here in support of the motion that facts are not facts, at least not anymore. I will do this with three primary arguments. The first being, as Arunima also spoke about, opinions are masquerading as facts and making it almost impossible for me to know the difference between the two. I will then talk about the overabundance of information that is also making it absolutely impossible, especially for the young ones, to understand where the fact ends and the non-fact starts. And third, I would go to how, again, as my opposition speaker spoke about, manipulation of factually accurate data can do much more harm than you and I can think of. To start with, let me take you to this grade 7 classroom. Students have just finished learning about the Indian independence and the Indian democracy, and this hand goes up, and the child says, minorities did not contribute to India's independence. There is silence in the room till another student says, yes, I saw a video on my father's mobile phone that had similar facts mentioned. Some more would talk about portals of information where they have noticed similar things being said. There is this teacher standing in the classroom aghast. These kids are fortunate that they had a teacher and the teacher had time. She would spend the next few lessons getting them to critically analyze what they thought was a fact and realize that it was merely an opinion of some people. But it was fairly easy for some people's opinion to become facts for these young, impressionable teens. Not all of us are as lucky as these kids were with that teacher in the classroom. I haven't even begun talking about children representing those minorities in that classroom and what the environment of that class was. I now move to this overabundance of data. More recently, we've been seeing a lot of ChatGPT being used. I can see it's also helped some of my fellow debaters. I asked ChatGPT a question on the Big Bang, and it said, singularity cooled down in milliseconds and presented us the universe as we know today. And I wasn't so sure about millisecond cooling down, so I asked it again. This time ChatGPT said, I am sorry, I was wrong, here is the truth. The second question I put in front of people is, are we outsourcing telling half facts and lies to the machines now? This was something only humans were doing till not long ago. The third and my final point that I make towards the motion, which is facts are not facts, at least not anymore, is on using or misusing, manipulating factually correct data to support one's argument. The first mention of it comes from the Indian epic Mahabharata, which some of you would feel is a fact, some would feel is a fiction, where Ashwatthama and Ashwatthama's death is presented as a fact, but one would realize much later that it was Ashwatthama the elephant. But that one misuse of a factually correct information would change the course of war. We've seen the same happen with democracy. We've seen the same happen with emergency. And more recently, I have seen people have been cooking their food on gas coming out of sewers behind their tea stall only because it's cheaper than LPG. The final point I leave you with, you might want to cling on to the fact that in the long run, facts will win. But let us not forget, just like history is written by those who win, facts will be written by those who are in power, those who have the tool, and those who have the means. And this is not just the fact, this is the truth. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
To take that example for Mahabharata, Ashwatthama did die. There was an elephant named Ashwatthama. He did die. That's a fact. So the fact that Yudhishthir, hid that it was an elephant he was referring to shows misinformation. Doesn't show that fact is not a fact.
Okay. So You're missing the elephant in the room. Ashwathama, the elephant is dead, is only one of several examples you can come out with from history that support the argument that this is not the first time it has been done. You talk about the Capitol Hill in the US, you talk about what's happening in the Indian Parliament, you talk about what is happening with the current Turkey and Russia war. Every day we are facing facts or things that look like facts being presented to move the public opinion.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. When you say, and you've given examples, that facts are being manipulated, and you gave the GPT example as well, then aren't you believing the fact that facts exist and not, going for the motion then, as you did?
Your question appears to talk about a very small subsection of the reality that we deal with, which is empirical facts that can be proven with an experiment. But all of us existing, living in the world that we're living in, are being faced by things that appear as facts that have much, much bigger impact on us. We are talking about democracy, we're talking about absolute truths. We are talking about the future that our children are going to inhabit. And in that context, I don't think there are facts existing anymore. It is actually more about whose fact is currently being accepted.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think you raise a really important point about the fact that people in power determine fact. But we also see that facts come to the rescue of victims often. The reliability of statistics for, say, rape survivors to say that most false rape reports are from 1% of total rape reports is a fact that people rely on to be able to prove the substantiability of their argument. Do you not think that that has value?
There are times when things are facts, but they're not necessarily true. For example, most people in this audience believe that humans use 10% of their brain in all of their life. Well, for a lot of people, it does appear so. But the science around it is that even for the most mundane things, we actually use the whole of it. I hope that answers the question in a very short time.
Thank you so much. Arnab Singh speaking for the motion for Hindu College. I'd now like to invite Divya Jain to speak.
Thank you so much. With the permission of the moderator, I would request to not be hidden behind the podium like often we hide facts in our life. A very, very good evening to all of you. I loved what you said, Arunima, and I'd like to add to that. Jawad did say that facts will be facts, and they will not disappear on the basis of your likes. These likes, guys, is not social media likes or hearts. And I just want to add to that, facts will be facts, and they will not disappear simply because you choose or someone chooses to fabricate them. I stand in front of this august house to oppose the motion that we have today in front of the house that facts are not facts. How do I plan to do this? I have 3 main points. First of all, facts, which is of course a word is our favorite word, I think, for the evening, is I will first define what is a fact. Secondly, another debated topic is this misrepresentation of facts. While it's possible to hide facts, misrepresent facts in the short time, I do believe that it is not something that's possible in the long run. And finally, this fear that we have of new technologies, AI deepfakes, actually fabricating facts, and how they're simply tools for us to use and not something that can create facts. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to realize that we have more access to information than ever before in the history of humankind. Now, just because this information might be misunderstood or misused does in no way actually cause the question of does that fact itself wrong or right? And I think at this point of time in our life, we should be talking about embracing and accepting these facts versus actually questioning their very existence. So to start off, what is a fact? I agree with Arunima's definition, and for me, fact is an objective truth that can be scientifically and empirically verified. It is something that can be verified. It has got scientific and empiric evidence behind it. So, Gaurika said, the earth revolves around the sun. Fact. Narendra Modi ji is our current Prime Minister. Fact. Last year, Hindu won the clash of the, not last year, the last debate, Hindu won the clash of the titans. Fact. I think that these debates are incredibly prestigious. It's also very fun. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my opinion. My 10-year-old there, it does not look like she's agreeing with it. Having said that, I think we have to understand that today, everyone has the ability to put their opinions, their voices on the internet, through social media, through different platforms that we have access to. And what this means, that it increases our responsibility to actually understand the sources of these facts and where and how we are verifying it. So going back to this discerning 10-year-old of mine, Noor, she will not accept a definition that she just picks up from Google. She's been taught that she needs to research it, figure it out, and Aruna, the Britannica is actually one of her favorite places to go to actually verify this information. Secondly, misrepresentation of information, of using facts, misusing them, and whether we talk about Mark Antony or being vilified by Octavius, right? I think misrepresentation is something that is happening since the start of time. I think now it's even easier for us to fact check. It's literally on our hands. And in the long term, facts will reveal themselves, right? And I think that's what we need to work with. And we can see this, the fall of Enron, whether it's the Satyam scam, if data has been mismanaged, if facts have been misrepresented, we will face the consequences. I will go to my last point. And this is that in the old age, if I left you to, and one of the basic skills you needed was to be able to hunt if you needed to survive in the wild. Today, if you let any of us in the wild, I don't know if we could hunt and take care of ourselves, but I do know that we could use GPS to find the right location and get us to safety. We live in the information age. In the past 10 minutes, 860 hours of YouTube videos, 1.4 million photos were added on Facebook and on Instagram. Right? And in this age, we need to really create is this ability of scientific discovery. So thank you so much, and thank you so much to the OSA for actually creating this debate, because it's allowed us to contest this topic, which is so important, so integral, and let us stand and believe that we will. Okay, so just a big hand to the OSA for organizing this and having this conversation.
So you seem to suggest that the fact that there is so much abundance of information available means that you will eventually come to the undeniable existence of a true fact. Do you think that's always possible, given that the people that are hegemonizing information dissemination are going to have certain biases and certain agendas?
Of course, absolutely. And I think that is literally the point that I'm trying to make. So I work in employability. I run a startup where we're working on employability. And Forbes did a survey on which is the most important skill in the 21st century, in this century of the information age. And it's not programming, it's not AI, it's actually the ability to have critical thinking, scientific inquiry, this ability to think, right? Students, kids today are taught what is the question that we're asking to come to this answer. And that is the reality of the world that we live in. And I think the more we accept it, own it, is the only way we can move forward and make the right decisions for a society that we can be happy and proud living in.
Hi, thank you for the speech. I think what you mentioned in terms of how in the long run, right, the facts will always emerge. And to bring back something from economics, in the long run we're all dead, right? So if someday someone today denies climate change, right, and as a result of that there's less policy action which takes place because of which, say, XX number of people die. Now, after they've gone, does that fact really matter, right? So in the broader spectrum of things, does that time not necessarily need to be a short one for the fact to have any value?
No, I agree and I disagree. I think we have to make decisions on policy. And you will make the information and the decisions on the basis of the facts and the information that's available today. So to be honest, in the Arish Batra case or any scenario that we are taking into place, we will take the current information that is available to us. What is verifiable out of that? What is the amount of scientific discovery? What is the provenance? What is the source of this information? Can we actually believe in it? Can we trust on it? And then we're making a decision on that. We're making a decision on the facts that we have available. Now, whether that decision is a fact, right, wrong, and is that decision a fact? I mean, we're going to hope that we make the right decisions and we have the right skills to make the right decisions going forward.
Right, thank you so much. I'm afraid we're out of time. Let's move on to our next team. We've got
solar system. That was a fact for almost over 7 decades, including 8 years of my own life. However, this was till the International Astronomical Union disproved it by making it a dwarf planet in 2006. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today's topic is this House believes that facts are not facts, and I'm Angarika, and I'm here to support the motion. Let's start with defining what exactly are facts. Facts, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, are a statement that is a statement that is known to be true. First of all, known, which is an assumption. Second, true. What exactly is true? So, true is anything that is supported by facts. So, this entire circular argument would bring you to something like Jeffrey Archer is a popular author because his books are bestsellers. But why are they bestsellers? Because he's a popular author. So this circular argument does not stand when you say something like the fact that circulating in the international media is that India is pro-Russia because it is not supporting the NATO countries in the stand against Russia. But is that really a fact, or is it supported by their version of truth that when you're not with me, you're against me? So facts are not facts. My second argument is that there is motivated or biased reasoning. As brought up by my worthy opponent from Hindu College, Ashwatthama is dead. However, what was said was not a half-truth. It was just how Dronacharya perceived it. There were 2 Ashwathamas. He was very, very well aware of it. He could have assumed that the elephant is dead because the elephant in the room could be perceived. Yet, he chose to agree that it was his own son who died. So, what exactly are facts? Facts are just perceptions, and they have always been perceptions. So, we rely on the understanding of the properties and relations of a fact because they're never in silos. If you look at the supposed facts, then supposed facts related to climate change, then India is the 5th biggest emitter in the world. However, there is another fact that India's per capita emissions are also the least. They're 41% less than the global average. So people motivated by different discourses in the climate conversation would say that India needs to lower its emissions. But the problem is that we have a huge population, which is why our emissions are that high. So what exactly are facts? Hence, I would say that facts are just conjectures or your own, without perspectives, they are nothing but hypotheses. For example, I'll bring another example to point. Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. That's incorrect. Hawaii's Mauna Kea is actually 4,000 feet taller than the Mount Everest. The only difference is that we measure its base from the sea level and not from the ground level. So that's another thing. Now that brings me to my third point, the responsibility of burden of proof. As a lot of my distinguished, esteemed opponents here spoke about empiricity of their arguments. So now, empirically, the headaches that I've been suffering from ever since I was a kid cannot be proven. a lot of MRIs, a lot of tests. Nothing shows that I'm physiologically suffering from headaches. However, psychology proves that you have psychosomatically induced headaches because of stress. So there is no empirical evidence per se, but headaches exist. Or are you just going to call it a figment of my imagination tomorrow and say, because, oh, you just think you have headaches, because that's what a lot of doctors did to me. Secondly, transgenders, they're born in a body which they do not identify with. Anatomically, it is proven that they belong to a particular sex. However, there is no proof that they feel otherwise. But are we going to diminish their suffering by saying, oh, there's no empirical proof, so your facts are not facts? That brings me to my fourth point, which is our facts are constantly evolving. What was fact? Like I said, Pluto was once a planet, today it's a dwarf planet. Secondly, what Einstein believed was that there is nothing faster than the speed of light. However, in 2022, there were 3 Nobel Prize winners who proved that the quantum entanglement is faster than the speed of light. In fact, there is proof that this can also be put in practice. So what was fact today will not be fact tomorrow. So are facts actually facts, or are they just hypotheses that we have built? So in conclusion, what I would like to say is that in a contemporary world where we're talking about subjective experiences, where we're acknowledging them for everyone, including people who want to get abortions, people who are from the LGBTQIA community, are we really going to diminish their suffering by saying that their facts are not facts because they're not empirically proven? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amrita Datta from Invitational College. I open the floor for questions. Yes, sir.
Hi, very well spoken.
Thank you so much.
My country's population and my country's emission. Now, the population can be a justification for the emission, but does that change the fact, the data available about my population and the emission?
See, that's what I'm saying. So when you attach perspective, that is when it becomes a fact, right? So when you look at it from that perspective of population, I can justify that my emissions are low. But if just by the sake of it, by just saying that India is the largest emitter, I'm not proving anything. I'm just trying to further a Western idea. And sorry, this is nothing to do with the organization I belong to. Just a caveat. So, just by saying that we are the largest emitters, we can't just say that on the face of it, because had we had the population of USA, our emissions would have been much lower.
Any further questions? Yes, please go ahead.
2 examples that you cited, one about the headache. So the headache is a fact, right? Even though it's not proven. So aren't you defeating the side that you've taken in the motion?
I'm quoting from one of our esteemed guests today here, who said that there is empirical proof. It needs to be empirically proven to be a fact, which nobody could empirically prove. So facts are subjective and they're just hypotheses, because today you might say that neither Freud can be proven or disproven. So are you going to say that everything that Freud said is a fact? So.
Any further questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so
Amrita
much.
Datta speaking for the motion.
A very good evening to everyone present here today. As the motion states that this House believes that facts are not facts, are we running away from the mere question that facts are indeed not that harmful to the society to gain the ultimate truth, or to gain the ultimate pursuit of happiness in our lives? And that is why I strongly believe that facts are facts, not because how they are perceived by one individual or one group of opinionated organization, but because they take us to a journey of our own personal development and personal truth. That is why facts are important. Now, when I say that the entire pursuit of happiness, why do I say that? Because when we disregard that facts are not facts, we are also disregarding the mere fact that we do not cater to what is personal memory. The main basis because of which
Nobel laureate Annie Ernaux got the Nobel Prize in Literature last year, because she kept intact her own personal memory throughout her journey. Yes, it was an arduous and a long journey to her own truth, to her own fact about how she perceived life and how she saw the society, the gender biases, the class distinction that exists. Those are facts that we cannot run away from. Those are facts that we have to accept, even if it is not catering to certain population in our society. And why do I believe that it is important? Because without fact, we are telling our younger generation, the youth population, that you do not have any basis to believe or to start a conversation on anything. You're basically opening a Pandora box without a plan of action as to how to cater or how to streamline these facts or how to streamline these opinionated or subjective facts that the entire debate has been talking about, right? And why do I believe that the Annie Ernaux example does stand true here? Because a lot of, during the entire debate, we talked about scientific fact, but we hardly touched upon the fact about societal fact. The kind of family background we come from, that is a fact. But then the kind of discrimination that the individual goes through suddenly does not become fact, it becomes an opinion, right? But these are facts that has to be regarded and accepted no matter who is suffering, whoever is suffering from it. And then when we also go and talk about the larger ideas, about the larger examples on climate change. Yes, climate is changing, that is a fact. It might be difficult for us to accept it right now because we may not be able to see its repercussion in the present. Obviously, that is not true in the case of Delhi. But then, in the long run, we know that these are the facts that we have to engage right now. We cannot just say that these are facts that I don't believe are facts. These are facts that are hampering me. Just because it might not hamper someone who's living in the hills does not disregard or does not give us the power to say that these are not facts that we should not engage with, or these are biased facts that that do not really help engage to the true behavior of how society functions. So with this, I also think that we are also stepping away from the responsibility, stepping away from talking about the responsibility of information verification that speakers prior to me talked about. And why that is important in this debate. Because if one is talking that facts are not facts in the proposition side, it also means that you do not have a basis to verify any information. And that is the benefit that we in the side of opposition are giving to you. We say that, yeah, we are accepting this fact. And yes, the next step is to verify this fact from our own vantage point. Right, so with this, I would like to end my case, but never my cause.
Thank you so much. Unmula Das speaking against the motion for Indraprastha College. I'd like to open the floor up for questions. Yes, please go ahead.
I think in a lot of instances, you use the possessive word her or are before the word fact, right? So, first part is, do you feel that facts are then personalized or specific to an individual? And if so, in that universe where everyone can have their own version or own belief of a fact, is that really a fact?
So, yes, I do believe in that, because we talked about how history is only written by winners. That was a fact which was true in maybe 100 years ago. But now we see the existence of Dalit histories. We see the existence of subaltern histories. So that is also a fact that is right in front of us. It is up to us if we take it true or if we take it as true or false. But we do know that this is a fact that was true for the Dalit people. Yes, it was true for the subaltern history people, whoever wrote those facts.
Any further questions for the speaker? All right, thank you so much. Unmula Das speaking.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Hindu Old Students Association, for this opportunity. So before I lay out the floor for today's debate, let me begin by sketching out how our team, for the purposes of today's debates, defines and understands facts. So we understand facts as a broad spectrum of aspects that could constitute data, information, observation, evidence, events, happenings, and experiences, which could be sensory, lived experiences, and so on. Now, for these varied aspects to be considered as facts, it is important that they have an element of actuality. They're not fact or fiction, and they should be they should have the value of being proven, being verified, and so on. There are also a few other qualitative characteristics that we attach to these, which is firstly, as I said, verifiability, but also an important aspect of traceability. That is, we should be able to trace the origin or the source of the data or the information or observation that we are referring to as a fact. Having laid this definition, I'll move forward with my substantive arguments for today's debate. I'm speaking in favor of the motion, and my argument consists of a series of interrelated arguments and substantives that will essentially try to lay out that all facts are in effect interpretations and they carry politics, histories, exclusions, and assumptions of their own. And this is linked to the fact that since they are interpretative in nature, they are inherently subjective, and therefore no claim to objective truth or grand truth could be laid. So my first argument is to deconstruct the entire notion of fact, which we are understanding as constituting this broad spectrum from data, information, evidence, which could be historical evidence, legal evidence, and so on and so forth. So my first argument is to deconstruct and try and understand and critically interrogate what is a fact and what becomes a fact, and to contest it and to say that in effect it is deeply embedded in subjective notions, ideas, discourses, histories, politics, inclusions and exclusions. Let me speak to the example of the food system in the country that the first speaker spoke about. So when we take the example of the food security system or the public distribution system, we've had long-standing debates about who gets included, who does not get included. What constitutes the poverty line has been a long-standing debate among economists, even though there is a certain threshold that has been defined. But the public distribution system in the country has seen large errors of exclusion and exclusion of people from lists. Now, why does that happen? Because of these are not just accounting errors, ladies and gentlemen. These are actually subjective judgments as to who can be included, who constitutes to be under the poverty line, and that is not some absolute truth. That is based on a series of calculations, which in itself is based upon certain assumptions and very deep-rooted assumptions about who can be considered to be the poor and what value is attached to the poor. Now let me take more examples of statistical data sets in the country, such as the Census of India. Now we've had long-standing debates about what is urban in the Indian context, and we've been debating questions of urbanization and so on in the recent past. Now, if we look at the census definition of urban, it says a minimum population of 5,000, at least 75% of the working population, male working population, note ladies and gentlemen, engaged in non-agricultural pursuits, and a minimum population density of 400 people per square kilometer. Now, notice the assumptions here, which are very, very grave and exclusionary, talking about able-bodied male workers and excluding large realities of women workers. Now, this brings me to my second point about facts being interpretive in nature. Now, my colleagues here have spoken about history being written by the winners. But ladies and gentlemen, history, as we know, is actually written by the historian who interprets and retells events of the past and happenings and creates particular discourses. So in as much as the colonial history exists through the colonialist archive, which casts out the native as savage and uncivilized, there exists indigenous history, ladies and gentlemen, which lays people's claims to the land as rightful inhabitants of the land with deep ties to the land. Likewise, if the nationalist imagination offers a particular conception of history, there are Dalit, working class, and subaltern histories, ladies and gentlemen, which present an entirely different picture of what constitutes the history. So therefore, history, facts, events, and so on are very contested domains and not sacrosanct truths. And I'll rest my case with that.
Thank you so much. The speaker for the motion from Kirodimal College, Isha.
Thank you so much. It was beautifully spoken. I'd love to sort of explore this definition of fact, and I agree that be certain subjective facts, there's subjectivity to it. What about, I mean, what do you feel that are there no objective truths, right? So, for example, Gorika's example of the Earth revolving around the sun. So, for you, is that a subjective truth or is that an objective truth? And is that a fact or not?
Thank you for your question. To take that very example, and my previous speaker actually answered this pretty eloquently when they stated as to how this wasn't a truth at a particular period of time in history, but then it became a truth because of the way in which the truth was constructed, the proof was given, and it had certain kind of acceptance. So therefore, all truths are subject to verification, subject to claims, subject to a certain set of assumptions that are embedded. Even scientific truth, for that matter, has its underlying assumptions. So therefore, we cannot lay claim to any sacrosanct truth. And that's the position I'm coming from.
Right. Any further questions? Yes.
India became independent from British in August 1947. Fact? History? Should be negated?
Okay, I'm not asking you to negate the history of independence. What I'm asking you to negate, but rather critically interrogate, is what becomes and what gets constituted as the history of the independence movement. So the history of the independence movement then is not just written by Mahatma Gandhi or Jawaharlal Nehru, but it's equally written by the large sections of the peasants and the workers and the women who took to the streets and put their bodies on the line for the independence. So it's not a question of whether India became independent, it's a question of what gets constituted as a fact of that independence.
Thank you so much. Isha Kundru speaking for the motion for Kirodimal College. I would now like to invite the speakers.
Good evening, everybody. I'll be speaking against the motion, and I agree with the definition that Isha has provided for everyone here today. But I would like to accentuate it further and talk more, since we are concentrating ourselves on more of what society believes to be facts. So let's stick to the social sciences. I think in the social sciences, what we consider to be facts have a lot to do with the level of rigor with which that piece of information has gone through. The years of it could be in terms of years, the amount of people who have reviewed it, and simply how much it impacts people and society today. For example, like 50 or 60 years from now, I don't think that people would believe smoking was harmful for health at all, even though there was very much evidence of people's mortality being reduced. But there was not enough of an information pool for us to go ahead and believe that. However, academics, just general observation over the years has gotten us, and even science and medics have come up to believe that, in fact, through multiple empirical evidence, smoking is harmful for health, and in all likeliness is something that will reduce your mortality. You can argue and you can go ahead and nitpick things like, yes, it reduces the probability of the fact that probability of you having a short life, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will have a short life. But we still choose to believe in the harm that smoking causes, because it is important for the larger society to believe and hold that kind of semblance. The proposition speaker of LSR argued that we do live in like a sort of a postmodern society where everything is up to interpretation. And I feel that in that kind of a society, it becomes even more important for us to hold certain things to stronger scrutiny. And upon those layers and layers of scrutiny and verifiability, do some things choose to stand as facts, right? The very fact that we were today talking about how the earth revolves around the sun, that was something that didn't stand true, exactly right. But the reality is that it becomes a fact over 500 years because of the level of rigor that piece of information went through. When Galileo came up with the piece of information that the earth in fact does revolve around the sun, nobody really believed him. It was years and years and years of other people supporting what he's saying, validating what he's saying, then again getting proved wrong by what they were validating, and years of cross-questioning, debating like what we are doing today, that has led us to believe in this common truth, because of which we can actually use time to come here and debate at 6 o'clock, right? These are things that require a lot of effort, which I think nobody has gone ahead and talked about. That fact is something, yes, it begins with a belief, like the very idea that, the fact that images are created from the nature with which lights are reflected, that's up to sensory interpretation, right? Everything is up to interpretation, and everything that comes and begins from a small belief. But it takes a mammoth amount of effort for it to become a fact, and I think that's something that no side has been able to argue. It has taken years and years for us to go ahead and believe smoking is harmful and injurious to health. 50, 60 years from now, cigarettes were advertised openly in television. But it took a lot of campaigning for us to go ahead and believe that it is something that is harmful. And if we do live in like a society that is postmodern, I think it becomes even more important for us to have, as the opposition of SRCC said, have some semblance of a benchmark for which people can go ahead and even scrutinize these facts, which are difficult to do in the first place. The right to information exists because it is important for us to verify and go ahead and be thorough about things. That's how rights happen. That's how campaigning happens. That's how the suffragette movement happened for women in society. Everything has to go with some level of rigor to leave some pillars of society to exist for where we can flourish and have society to further accentuate and personal development to take place. In that sense, we cannot just go ahead and just take away that value from the idea of a fact. The fact exists as a pillar in society to go off and do other things. For example, nuclear fusion is simply a theory which goes ahead and says that atoms collide and energy happens, but the applicability of it is massive. But that applicability only happens if you believe in that fact. Some people use it to create nuclear weapons, but some people use it to create energy which is pollution free. And that's how you choose to use facts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We open the floor for questions. Yes.
Hi, Ankita. It's nice hearing you speak again.
Nice.
You said something about how a small belief requires a lot of rigor and effort to be able to then be verified as fact, right? I'm curious to see which beliefs would be able to engage the infrastructure and academic rigor that's required to then go and become verified as facts, because I'm guessing not everyone's beliefs would be able to attract that effort.
Yes, but over time, I think that the structure reinforces itself. The structure, if it's strong enough, it opens itself to scrutiny, opens itself to continuous verifiability. For example, a structure like democracy didn't just come up one day, somebody theorized it and it was like, yes, today every country in this world will have democracy. It took ages and ages of campaigning for people to understand that this is a superior way of perhaps living. And even today, people don't believe in it, and there is a wage argument in it, but there are informations and more informations that wage for it, and those semblances and those benchmarks are important to exist for us to even fight something in the first place, right? Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead.
Do facts remain facts with the additional information available, which shows that that was not true? And if that is true, in that case, how do we conclude saying that facts are not facts?
In a situation where facts refuse to remain facts, I cannot think of an example, but that's exactly the point. That's knowledge building at the end of the day. The amount of effort that has taken for that fact to not become fact should also be acknowledged, right? And the amount of effort, the amount of productivity, the amount of information that comes as a consequence of trying to prove that fact to not be true has led to the knowledge and contradiction of that fact. So again, it's my argument that that benchmark existing is extremely important, right?
Right, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your speech. It was really nice. My only problem here is that you've been saying that it went through a lot of rigor and a lot of verifiability, and all of that is well and true. However, when you look at Einstein's hesitance to acknowledge quantum entanglements, he constantly opposed it, and there were a lot of people who agreed with him, and it went through a lot of rigor. But today we have people who have proved that quantum entanglements actually are faster than light, and that it is now being even put to use as in China. So, like, how do you talk? So, if it's campaigning that's getting you all the verifiability, like anything can become facts, right?
But are you not furthering my argument in that it took a lot of.
But it gets disproven, right?
No cross questioning, please.
Yeah, I like how the proposition argues that everything can get disproven, but don't really acknowledge the amount of effort it takes for something to get disproven, and that is what distinguishes a belief from a fact, right? A fact is something that is upholstered by a massive amount of effort, not just by people, but larger societies and entities and institutions and societies. And breaking that, yes, perhaps in 200, 300 years, is possible, but you need to understand how much that fact has provided productivity and the upliftment of society within that period of 300 years, and that can only happen if you believe and acknowledge the existence of that fact.
Right, thank you so much. That was the...
Madam Chairperson, members of the House, we're here today talking about debating facts are not facts. And of course, we have to start by defining what are facts. So I reached out to the highest authority in the land and asked what are facts, and this is what ChatGPT had to say. And I quote, "A thing that is known or proven to be true. Information that is used as evidence as part of a report or news article, and the truth about events. Therefore, essentially, a fact becomes a fact when it's disseminated to a large number of people and it is accepted as absolute. Information becomes fact when it is absolute. If truth can be impeached, if truth can be challenged, it is no longer a fact." I'm so glad to be in the proposition because not only do I genuinely deeply believe that facts are not facts, I also believe that facts should not be facts. The proposition today will use 3 primary points to prove that facts are not facts. 1, truth and facts are as much a playground for power and bias as anything else. When somebody puts out a claim, it comes with a set of questions. Who is making the claim? What is the context in which they're making that claim? What is the platform on which they're making that claim? Who is consuming that fact? Where are they consuming that fact? Where is the platform from which they are consuming that fact? It's like that exercise we used to have in the Bal Bharati. You know, they give you a paragraph and then it would be kisne kaha, kyun kaha, kab kaha, kaise kaha. Except now it comes with an ancillary, which is kisne suna, kab suna, kaha suna, kaise suna. Secondly, even if one is to assume that the underlying data is absolutely unimpeachable, is absolutely free of bias, which is impossible, even then, 2 people with their own biases interpreting the same data will come with vastly different interpretations. So then where is the fact? And number 3, and this is most important and I hold this deeply in my heart, this House will question and critique the absolutism and dogmatism that accompanies the notion of facts. To abide with absolutism is to abide with the idea that it is the end of learning, the end of enlightenment, the end of progress. It is literally stemming the tide of social justice. The American Psychiatric Association publishes this tome of facts, big thick book of facts, called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. In 1963, and I quote, this edition defined homosexuality as a sexual deviation and listed it as a mental disorder under the category of sexual disorders. It was a fact found in a book of facts, quoted by scientists using empirical data and used to clinically diagnose patients. This week, the Supreme Court of India is going to start hearing petitions from people who are asking the highest court in our land for the right to marry. My partner and I are petitioners in that case. If that fact of 1963 was still true, then my love story is deviant. My family is deviant, and the parents of my son are deviants. Sometime in the late 19th century, early 20th century, scientists in North America and Europe decided that they could measure the size of somebody's skull and decide empirically what is the intelligence of that person. And this was based on incredible, empirical, amazing data. And it led to tragedies. Thousands of women of color, people with disabilities, homosexuals were forcibly sterilized because they were considered unfit for reproduction. Thank God, facts change. Because if facts did not change, we would still be measuring each other's skulls. The world of medicine, which we deeply trust, it is the hallowed ground of facts. And yet, if the world of medicine cannot give us absolute fact, then absolutely nothing can and nothing should. We should all be fact checkers. Because remember, once upon a time, the world was flat and somebody fact checked that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The speaker for the motion for Miranda House, Aditi Anand. And our last speaker for today, the speaker against the motion from Miranda House. Oh, sorry. Interjection. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for that. I hope your love story has a very happy ending. I'll be rooting for you. I also loved your example of Bal Bharti. So what's interesting for me is that you started the universal truth of fact being defined by Chat GPT. काफी interesting है, like Chat GPT. It's something. So Chat GPT recently, and of course I think a lot of us from Delhi University would feel for this, is it tried to take the UPSC exams and it got 54 out of the total. So it actually failed. So it's a great tool and it's a great start, but I'd love for you to comment on that.
I mean, I think you've proved my point that something that can troll the internet and still fail the UPSC exam pretty much goes to show that there is no absolute truth. Number one. Number two, I don't know if you're challenging my definition of fact and truth, or are you simply challenging where I got it from, which succinctly proves my point that every time you make a claim, the first thing that you think is who said it, where did it come from?
Right, any further questions? Yes, go ahead.
Very well spoken, very passionate. Here's what I put to you. You said truth and fact are playground of the powerful. If that was so, then homosexuals would not be in a position to come out and tell us today the fact is that this was never deviant. What was deviant was the social acceptance of it.
Actually, for both the examples that I chose to talk about, social change came when those movements gained ground and people within those movements got a more and more powerful voice. It did not happen for a very long time because the LGBTQ movement didn't have the kind of powerful advocates that it now has. So certainly, just because the playground is made up of powerful people that we like, doesn't mean that it's not a playground for power.
Right, thank you so much. Speaker for the motion, and I'm so sorry for today, Mahasadiki speaking against the motion from Miranda House.
All right, so I'm going to start with a very simple experiment, and I'm the last speaker, so I'm begging your indulgence. So I'm making a statement that if you open your mouth, stick out your tongue, you cannot breathe from your nose. Please try it. Open your mouth wide, stick out your tongue, you can't breathe from your nose. Two people here in front of me are trying that. Ma'am, please tell me. You couldn't? What about you, sir? You could breathe. Anybody else? Anybody else who has tried this, please, I'm begging your indulgence. Stick out your tongue, open your mouth wide. Why don't you do it? You could breathe. So 2 against 1. Yes, you can breathe. What I made was a mere statement. What you are saying is fact, and that cannot be denied. You can breathe while your mouth is open through your nose. We may look silly, yes, maybe like a dog or a cat hanging their tongue out, but we can breathe. So here's what I'm trying to prove today. Facts exist, facts remain, and facts can be verified, which 3 of you, very kind people, just did. Today I'm going to, as you must have already guessed by now, I'm speaking against the motion. I truly believe facts are facts. And I'm going to focus on 2 very basic facts of our very existence, life and death. I'm standing here, right before you. You may shut your eyes to me, but I will still exist. You pinch me, I will feel pain. If I cut myself, I will bleed. I'm a living, breathing individual. No one can deny that. That is a fact. We are all here, all of you, sitting right there across me. I can shut my eyes and I can say there's nobody there. But that will not be a fact. There are people, living, breathing individuals, right across me, across the stage. It is a fact. Life is a fact. I'll come to death now, which is a fact. A morbid fact, which we are witnessing around us for the last couple of years, unfortunately. The Ukraine war. Is it a war at all? Russia says it's not a war. It's a special operation. The West says it's a war. India says it's a conflict. There is a perception around it. But what is the ultimate fact? The ultimate fact is that deaths are happening. Deaths of soldiers, deaths of civilians. Death is a fact, an undeniable fact, whether or not you choose to accept it, whether or not you choose the data that is coming from the ground as gospel truth. Figures, numbers may differ. They are not facts, they are statements. Let's not confuse statements with facts. Facts remain. I'll give you another example. The Galwan Valley clashes. India lost 20 soldiers. China said, nobody died. Our Chinese soldiers are fine. The facts came out 2 years later maybe, when Anthony Claxon from the Klaxon said that there were many more deaths on the Chinese side than on the Indian side. Facts were delayed, but facts emerged. You can't deny facts, you can delay facts. You can shut your eyes to facts, but facts will remain. Very closely linked to death is suffering. Again a fact. And that fact can be proven by medical science. Syrian children at the moment are malnourished. That's a suffering. That can be medically proven as well. Even if you choose to say, no, they are not suffering, everything is perfectly fine with this world. COVID deaths happened. Statistics may vary. People may deny certain statistics that emerge. But we all know that deaths happened within families. Now I'll come to one of my favorite authors, P.G. Wodehouse. In The Adventures of Sally, he said, the fascination for shooting as a sport almost wholly depends on whether you're on the right or the wrong side of the gun. Facts are like that gun. If you believe that facts will blow up in your face, you will deny those facts, but those facts will remain. If you believe that the gun is on the other side, you will choose to believe the facts. So you may negate facts, dismiss facts, fear facts, delay facts, but facts remain as such.
Thank you so much, Siddiqui, the final speaker for the day, and Arnav, go ahead.
When a fact is denied, you actually never get to know that you were denied the fact. So isn't your entire narrative based on the ignorance that facts are never denied.
That is exactly the point I was making, that you may be ignorant of facts, but that doesn't mean that that fact never existed. For instance, for instance, I'll give you the example of Pluto, as was made. The fact that it was a dwarf planet came out much later, but that is a fact now, and that remains. Just because information around Pluto was delayed, that it does not have the gravitational pull to dispel the smaller objects around it, which is the definition of a planet now, doesn't mean that it wasn't a fact earlier. It was. It was perhaps our ignorance that we did not know it as a fact.
Right, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for reiterating my point. But so that's the basic idea. So when you say facts remain, if I am dispelling a fact by saying my definition itself of the fact is no longer existing. For example, atoms were the smallest element of smallest unit of matter, but then we got to know that there are electrons, protons, neutrons, and now we know that that they can be subdivided. So how can you say facts remain when they're being dispelled by further studies, further definition changes?
Yes, so again, that fact has been delayed because our knowledge at that particular point did not allow us to reach the exact fact. It has been delayed, but ultimately we have reached the fact, much like China. It can deny whatever, but the facts will come out.
Any further questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we come to the end of the speakers and the interjections. As I said, we have 10 minutes of questions from...
Suicide don't happen because suicide is not calculated in terms of what farmers...
All right. Any more questions? We've got a question here, the gentleman in the hat.
For the entire panel here. And the question is, as lawyers, when we started, we were asked and we were told that lawyers can show black is white and white is black. And many years ago, there was a great lawyer called Lord Erskine who appeared before a very eminent judge in the House of Lords. And the judge asked him, but Mr. Erskine, can two blacks make a white? I will tell you the answer later, but can anyone attempt to answer that question? Can two blacks make a white?
Imagine the answer would be a yes. And I mean, in my head, I'm thinking of of two black men who decide to get themselves and adopt themselves as surrogate child. So, you have two children and two blacks made a white.
Well, the answer that Lord Erskine gave to this most eminent judge in the House of Lords was, my lord, when two black ravens get married, they bring into this world a white egg, and therefore, my lord, two blacks can make a white. You see, that's on a very lighter vein because we needed to lighten the mood. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, let's see if there are any further questions which we are getting from the audience.
Where debates run on burdens to prove, and the simple opposition burdens remains to be that facts are facts. Why was then there a need to establish why facts are important when I do not understand why you need to prove the importance of facts anyway? As long as if the facts are good, bad, important, not important, nobody cares. If it's a fact and that can be proven, you go ahead and fulfill your burden. Any justification, any engagement.
All right, yes, all right, please go ahead.
So either side have. I think it would be a purely academic exercise for us to limit ourselves to our facts, and tell me which facts are facts. I think it's important to contextualize the debate in where we are today, how this motion would affect us as people, how we should make policy, how decisions should be made, how opinions are formulated, because otherwise it's just a waste of an hour and a half and a waste of a worthy audience. I think that it's highly important for us to consider that even if some facts may in fact be facts, whether or not seeing them as falsifiable is important or not is a worthy debate to be had, and I don't think we should limit ourselves. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. Yes, please. 1 second, we'll come to you next.
Motion, it becomes important to state the importance of the motion first. And because it's a belief motion, you have to first establish that there exists some benefit on side proposition and there exists some kind of harm in both the sides. So in that sense, because when we talk about beliefs also stem from the mere question that what is helping us and what is not helping us. And that is why this debate also talked about the importance of existence of these facts in the first place, and then go on to challenge that do these facts benefit one side, harm one side or not. So I think that is a very technical thing in this debate that you have questioned. I hope it answers.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
I just quickly want to add that what my colleagues have already said, that we can't take also motions at just face value of I have proven this and hence proved. So there are burdens which you state, and then there are burdens which are more underlying to the motion. So if one is arguing that facts are not facts or facts are facts, then there are normative burdens to consider in terms of debating the very significance of what is a fact, and not just, it's not some scientific or mathematical formula that one is trying to prove or disprove. These are also larger socio-political debates, as Gauri said. So,
can we take one final response?
And I think just to add on to what everyone's already mentioned, I think ultimately when in the debate you're coming to a point where you're doing a cost benefit analysis of sorts implicitly, right? I think when you're talking of the importance, that is speaking to the benefit, right? Because for instance, when you have the other side talking about, say, misinformation, right? Which is really not the fault of the fact itself, but it's maybe how people are using it or rather misusing it. In that universe, right, it becomes important to state as well as establish the importance, because that's how you ultimately decide the cost benefit.
Right, thank you so much. Thank you for the questions from the audience. Clearly got a conversation going. And with that, we would like to disagree. Raise your hands. I think in this case, the ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Invitational debate with us. When we started this debate, it's very interesting. The first debate was only between Hindu and Stephens. And then Dr. Sharma told me that, this is very biased. We need to open it out and invite all the top 6 colleges of the university to participate, which is what we did. Unfortunately, after 2 years, due to their internal problems of the governing body and the principal, Stephens could not match sending a team every year, and there was no sort of cohesion with them. So we decided to replace them, and that's why you have KMC here. And I think it's worked out very well. We have the best 6 colleges here. Bad luck to the college across the road. They always live in a shadow. We are also, the Old Students Association of Hindu College is, I would say it myself, is the most active alumni association, one of the most active in the country. We do about 9-10 events a year. We have this, we have our lecture series, we have the Hindu golf, we have our meets in Eastern India, in Northeast, in Bombay. And we keep on doing a lot of activities with college. So this year, as part of our 125th year celebration, the Old Students Association has funded and set up a state-of-the-art multimedia studio lab in Hindu College, which is going to be inaugurated next month. And all thanks to Akash. Akash is the man who got everything together, and hopefully it'll really spur the students. So many of our students in the college are going into media and television and entertainment. So it's a full 2-camera setup and give them a lot of opportunity to work with. For this year's debate, I want to thank Akash. Akash is the coordinator for the debate, and he's really worked hard trying to get it together. He went to the extent of recommending speakers for other colleges. So, to the principals, which is good. So, he's doing a lot of research. And thank you so much, Akash, once again. We are also very fortunate to have with us in the audience here one of our esteemed alumnus, uh, Mr. Muktesh Pardesi, who is the secretary of the G20. Muktesh. And also, just to give you a background, Muktesh is the architect of the Passport e-Seva. He is the one who started it, this TCS thing and making it so user-friendly. So now Muktesh, as secretary of G20, is also going to organize one of the G20 lecture series in our college, probably in the month of April or May, and we look forward to doing that with him. But I would like to tell you all once again, all of you who are here from every college, please feel free to reach out to the OSA. The OSA is very, very helpful to other alumni. The principal of Stephens asked us for 2 air conditioners for his library. We gave him that also. So we are very, very helpful. So thank you once again, and I would now request, while the judges are tabulating, our chief guest, Dr. Kavita Sharma, who's an institution by herself, to come and speak.
All of you would agree it was a wonderful, wonderful evening. Very, very meaningful. And, a lot of words, fact, opinion, belief, truth, verification, these are all very loaded words. And I still remember Bacon's essay on truth, where he began by saying when Jesus' defense was that he was propagating the truth. So what is truth, said the jesting Pilate, and would not wait for an answer. So, so what is truth? We don't know. And especially we don't know in this postmodern world, because everything is debatable. Sometimes I start to feel, as a couple of speakers said, what are we going to build ourselves on if we are going to debate everything and demolish everything? So just to be able to move on and build a society, we need to believe in something, whether they are facts of the moment or opinions of the moment or opinions masquerading as facts or whatever it is, And that brings me to my state of being the chief guest. I never know whether I'm the chief guest or the chief host. So, it's again a very postmodern situation. But I'm very happy that Akash Banerjee this time took over, because I honestly do believe that the baton must pass to the younger generation. I don't think, we have a tendency in this country to just hang on to everything. But that should change, and unless the baton passes, society becomes static, stale, and therefore not a very livable society. But I do believe I've got the Dada Saheb Phalke Award today, by being made the chief guest. Anyway, yes, we started this debate, as Mr. Ravi Burman said, with Hindu Stephens, and I have never, even throughout my time as the principal, and I'm not saying it with tongue-in-cheek or malice, when people would ask me about this rivalry, so-called rivalry, there are many, many reasons for it, but I would, which I don't want to go into now, but anyway, I would say, see, I have no rivalry with Stephens. There are 1,000 students. I'm 2,500 students. There are 8 departments. I have 16 departments. What is this rivalry about? They are really too small for me to consider them as rivals. And they wanted 2 air conditioners, which is so funny. Anyway, why, again, I had thought of this debating thing, and as I said, there was this big hullabaloo about the rivalry, which was really a cricket rivalry more than anything else. And of course, because we've been opposite each other for so long, whether it was in Dariba, Chandni Chowk, or whether it was in Kashmiri Gate, and as luck would have it, even on the campus. So that myth of rivalry goes on. But I was quite skeptical of this Hindu-Stephens debate and kind of cementing that kind of an opinion or a notion or fact, as some of you would say. So I kept saying, no, we must open it out. And we must understand that we can hold multiple truths together. Because that's the definition of an educated person to me. And therefore, you know, in this age of intolerance and violence, increasing violence, the whole idea was that to remind people that to disagree is not to be an enemy. It is actually quite helpful for people to have a genuine disagreement. Now, as Mr. Ravi Burman mentioned, I see the judges are back, so I'm going to wind up. You know, Hindu College has been unique because it had a parliament. And many people have heard about this parliament, and where there was no nationalist leader who did not come. It was the platform for encouraging young people to participate in the independence movement. Now, post-independence, and it carried on this thing of debating and discussing in the parliament for some years. But now, because of various reasons, many societal, the parliament has kind of lost that kind of a significance. For one thing, every department has its own society and does its own thing, so then why should you come together in a parliament? But now that it is the 125th year, 1899 was when we got established. I'm just wondering, I haven't yet discussed it. It's like, I've been thinking about it for the last 2 or 3 days. Next debate, maybe we can recreate the parliament. No? And instead of debating a topic, we can debate a policy. See that again? No, it will be on. I'll tell you an interesting thing. During the centenary, the then Prime Minister, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, came. And I had the Prime Minister of the college sitting there and the leader of opposition also. He says, "Pehli baar, ek mayan mein do talware hain." You know, so, and he said to me, "I hope your parliament is better than ours. And don't follow our parliament norms. Follow the actual parliament norms." So we will not follow our parliament norms. We will follow the actual parliament norms. So I'm just thinking aloud, and I don't know. We have to sit down and think about it, and you know. And I want to say this over and over again, that I am very grateful to all of you, all the colleges and the principals. I know how hard pressed they are for time and how difficult it is to contact people and to follow it up, for having made this possible. Because without all of you, it's not possible. So thank you very much, and a big round of applause to everyone and to the principals of the colleges that are here, that they have made this possible. And I'm requesting you for your support and help. If we do, we'll do the debate. So of course we need that. But if we do the parliament, it would be great fun that if all of you came together and we could have actually the treasury benches and the opposition and a speaker and debate a policy. So thank you all very much, and look forward to next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Momentum. Thank you. And now I request our moderator, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to Kajori Sen.
So the two best speakers, if I can start with number 2, it's Dr. Arunabha Singh. And the best speaker, Aditi. Thank you.
Akash Banerjee will just say
dinner is concerned. That's the whole idea of a nice warm evening. Trust me, I've been here also, as a matter of fact, and ironically, the year that I took part, Hindu lost. Um, but since then, I started to develop this very close association with the Alumni Association, and Ravi Varman sir, who's just been the typical Hinduite, not giving up, calling me and saying that you have to do this, and ultimately made me do this. And I'm absolutely happy that this fell together. Before we break for drinks and dinner, my request to each one of you, if I can, if I may, is that we've always tried to have the best speakers possible, but we understand that every college has its own stuff to deal with, rather than trying to find alumni to take part in a debate that is being organized by Hindu alumni. Could I please request all of you, if you send a note of thanks to your respective principals for taking that time out, coordinating this with us, and also if you could suggest some names, some alumni that you might know. They may be debaters, they may not be debaters, that's absolutely okay, because the idea is to inculcate this whole concept of having a civilized debate and discussion, which is becoming rarer by the day. So that would be absolutely great. To the audience, I'm just saying is that there comes a time, maybe a few years after college, is that when you start to get the pangs of your alumni, of your particular college, and the time spent there, and of course trying to give something back. So any of you, please feel free to connect with us. Any of you know a fabulous debater, have been a debater, please let us know. You know what, it just opens up so many avenues and friendships. I have Rakshit, who's sitting there, my debating senior, and I got in touch with him literally, and we met because we were organizing this debate. So you might not know, some old friendships might get rekindled, and of course, good times to roll. So thank you so much. You've been a great audience. You've been a very patient audience. Let's go in for the cocktails and the dinner.